Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I will be addressing this Mano and DJ Academics situation. I don't really want to call it a beef. It's more of a kind of a smaller topic, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a big thing, especially in hip hop. So Academics, for some reason, he's a huge streamer, huge has a huge platform, a huge voice in the hip hop world. But for some reason, he addressed older hip hop artists still dressing in their same as they did in their 20s and in their 40s and 50s today. Which, is a weird statement to make for several reasons, and I'll get into those reasons. But the first reason is that people dress for comfort, for style, for personality, for what they know. Dressing should not be equated to an age or to an age group specifically, especially in hip hop. Uh, because would you say a child that you know, a elementary school student or a middle school student dressing up in suits every day, would you say they're dressing, too old? Your dress is your dress, and not a certain style is not equating to an age necessarily, unless you're wearing like onesies or something as adult or, something like that. Most age appropriate clothing is not really such a thing. So it's kind of weird for DJ Academics to bring this up, but he always had this kind of nitpicking beef with the older generation because I remember a few years back, or maybe even close to 10 years back, he said that a lot of the originators or pioneers of hip hop looked dusty, and he really didn't specify, he didn't put an address on it and say who he was talking about. I think eventually later he did, but he doesn't really show much respect to hip hop, and I'll talk about it in that a little bit with these streamers and how they are not really a part of the culture, but they kind of feed off the culture, vultures esque. That I'll talk about here in a little bit. But we know Academics is a shock jock, and he does great things to bring attention to his platform and to his page, but it doesn't necessarily bring positive energy or positive reviews to hip hop. It just kind of, poops on hip hop, and what we don't need more of that because we know greater society already does that. So I think it's wrong just for him to bring up hip hop in this negative light. Um, but the second reason that that Academics was wrong in his analysis of these artists and the way they dress, especially the older artists, is that we're the only genre in music that actually does that to each other. Other genres don't say country music artists when they get to their 50s and 60s that they can't sing country anymore. They have an outdated style. They shouldn't wear jeans anymore. They should put a suit on. They should stop wearing cowboy hats and driving pickup trucks. No, they don't say that. They don't say that with R&B singers. You're 50, 60 years old no more. You shouldn't sing about love making, or you shouldn't sing about falling in love. You've been married for 30 years. Nobody believes that story. They don't say that in those genres. Only in hip hop will say, well, you shouldn't rap anymore about the streets, and you shouldn't uh, dress a certain way, and you shouldn't look younger. It's only in hip hop we do this. And Academics is just perpetuating a stereotype or a narrative that's continued out through hip hop and is only exclusively done for hip hop. Other genres don't do that. Um, in the famous words of Tyler the Creator, F age, live dreams and have fun. Because your age shouldn't be a reason for you not to be your same self or you to change to a narrative now. Nobody says, "Oh, well, I'm 40 now. Let me just throw a suit on every day and put on a turtleneck." It doesn't work that way. If you've always dressed in jeans and urban clothing, and it's a part of your brand, i.e., a Mano, i.e., Fabulous, i.e., a Jim Jones, or most of those artists. Now you'll see artists like Nas and Jay Z wear suits a lot because they have businesses and they're in the corporate world essentially. So of course they're going to wear suits because that's where they are. But then you have, athletes even like Allen Iverson, who they tell him all the time they had to make him wear a suit for the Hall of Fame because he would have wore jeans and a t-shirt or a jersey or something or jacket, leather jacket or something like that because that's Allen Iverson's brand. That's what he's comfortable in. and he's essentially a part of hip hop too. He did music back in the day, but nobody really judges artists on that or people's dress before that because that's that person's style. Um, but and they even do it with the sound as well. But this year proved that the older artists are shattering that mold between Pusha T and Malice from the Clips. What they've able to do musically. Freddie Gibbs is an older artist. What he's been able to do. We know what Two Chains has been doing. He started in the game late, and he's in I believe if not in his 50s, close to it. He's still doing things great in hip hop. Then of course you have Nas, who has been a model of consistency, and I'm ready for that album to come out next week. Then you have Jay-Z popping out every now and then doing things. So the older artists are breaking the mold and showing you these younger artists how to do it. But to judge artists and hip hop artists, especially on their dressing, is anti hip hop because hip hop is about culture. Hip hop is the only music that encompasses everything. It's the way you dress, it's the way you rap, it's the way you DJ, it's the way you break dance, the way you use graffiti, the knowledge of of hip hop, the way you cover social issues, all these things. So your attire is a big part of hip hop, and being yourself and being originality is all about hip hop. And for academics to say these things, it just shows you that he's not really a part of the culture, but he's eating off the culture. Because we have the DJ Academics name, but we never seen him DJ, which is ironic. Um, but the way you dress in hip hop shouldn't be criticized because your style is not dictated by that. Like your style is what you make it. It's not what that is assigned to you. There's no rules on dressing and the way you want to do things. If you feel like people should dress a certain way, that's how you feel, but you shouldn't perpetuate that or enforce that, so to speak. So it's very irresponsible, I think, for academics to do this because you shouldn't change for age, but change for your style and for what fits for you. And for Manos and especially Jim Jones's persona, them put a suit on, it just doesn't seem fitting for what they do. They dress, they've known for the dress styles and for the scarves. I remember Dipset was a huge part of fashion. I know Cam wears suits now, but I mean, that's a part of his show persona and things like that. But if you catch him in day to day on the streets, he's probably in, urban attire. He's not really wearing suits like that, because it's more of an uptight style. But academics doesn't even dress this way. So I'm not even sure why he said this because he's not really young itself. He's in his 30s too, as well. Same as I am. So, um, the reason why I wear um, you know, bow ties and suits and dress clothes and things like that because I want to be taken, seriously in professional world, and then and to also, for my own consciousness of just being able to fit into society. Because me as a big black guy with dreadlocks, a lot of times I'm seen as a threat or and things like that. So I want to look more acceptable to society, even though that really won't change anything. But in my own self consciousness, it makes me feel like I can be. But that's just my own personal style. I don't want to force that on anyone else or say anyone else should dress this way. This is just for what fits for me, for what makes me comfortable. So academics saying that Jim Jones and Fabulous and these guys should dress more age appropriate. There's no such thing as an age appropriate. Like I said before, unless they're wearing onesies or something, then it'll be different. But then even if they wanted to in hip hop, that's your style. That's your style. Nobody, should be judging that because we try to encourage originality in hip hop, and that's what I think is missing in hip hop nowadays, especially with these streamers, because they have so much influence, but they really don't know a lot of hip hop. I respect what Kind Sanat does, but he didn't even know who Wale was. He called him Wally, and his commenters or his fans had to tell him, "Hey, that was Wale," and he didn't even know that. Despite him being a younger artist and Wale being somewhat introverted, but most of these artists today are introverted because that's more of the style. There are more Eminems today than there are, a Nelly or, um, you know, or whatever artist you want to say that steps out a lot. Artist that's probably in that streaming community, like a Nicki Minaj or something like that. There are more Eminems than there are Nicki Minaj's and Nelly's and Snoop Dogg's. Especially, there's really not a lot of Snoop Dogg's anymore. Most people's pedigree is to be introverted. So you have the Scissors, the Kendrick Lamar's, you have pretty much any artist you can name today is more introverted. I mean, you have Glorilla and Sexy Red who step out a lot, but for the most part, people's brands are being introverted. So, um, so you really don't have a lot of data today on those artists and what they do, as far as personality wise. So you don't really have that data. But when you do have the data, like I said, we shouldn't criticize them for what their style is. Their style is their style. But I think it's just real irresponsible for DJ Academics to do this again. But it just shows you how these streamers are so disconnected from the reality of hip hop. They talk on hip hop, but they're not really invested in a culture. They didn't do the research a lot. They just talk about on issues surrounding hip hop, but not necessarily what hip hop is and the pillars of hip hop and the elements of hip hop, what hip hop was built on. But that just shows you another example of that. So tell me your thoughts about this. And until next time, I'll see you next time.